Once again, a nation once again. Hello everyone and welcome to the latest podcast from the Independent Activist here in Belfast. My name's Fra Hughes and we're joined today again. We have the pleasure and company of Dr Saeb Shaath. Saeb was the Palestinian representative to Ireland between 2001 and 2003, and he is the patron of a local charity, Palestine Aid, which has recently donated over 200,000 meals to 2,400 displaced families in Gaza. Dr. Shaath, thank you very much for joining us, and Happy New Year, brother.
Happy New Year to you and to all.
Thank you. We're just going to maybe do the year in review for 2024. Now, obviously, at the heart of everything that's happening in West Asia is what happened in Gaza on the 7th of October 2023. Do you maybe want to explain to us the background as to how these events came about and the reaction from the Israeli Zionist regime in Tel Aviv and everything that's happened in Gaza between then and now? Thank you.
Okay, I need to give a little bit of historical background because it didn't start in the 7th of October 23, it started in 1917 even. But let's say the British colonial empire, when it occupied Palestine and wanted to turn it into an outpost for the British Empire, to loot the resources of the region and to control West Asia and East the Mediterranean coast as well, created this kind of genocide mechanism, which is in a previous interview with you, I mentioned it was tested in the colonial labs, which was for it the first island for the British. And the British, they wanted to bring a secular society to impose it on the Palestinian and to displace them, exactly as I said, as they did with the Ulster plantation in the mid-17th century. The same thing, when you bring people on top of a people, it's a formula of genocide. And that's what they manufactured in Palestine. So they helped the British and their Zionist thugs, which they brought from all over Europe, which is to them to solve the Eastern question, get rid of the Jewish population, European Jewish population out of Europe, and send them in the Middle East and use them as a tool to strengthen the empire and to safeguard its interest. This is the British imperialist goal, and this is what the United States of America inherited as well. And that's why you can see the partnership in genocide at the start with the British and today with the British and the Americans and other European entities within the Zionist entity project in there to safeguard it. So they displaced the British with the Zionist entity by the time of 1948, nearly 1 million out of their homes and villages in Palestine, from the north to the south, and pushed a lot of these people to the neighboring countries like in North and in Lebanon and in Jordan and in Syria, and some even pushed farther to Iraq and Egypt, and the rest in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip today, which is Gaza Strip, used to be maybe 5 or 6 times the size of it today. As well, they pushed in it 80% of the population of Gaza. They came from cities like Jaffa, which today they call it Tel Aviv, and adjacent Ashkelon and Jorah and Sim and all of these areas, which is around Gaza, which is as well today they trying to call it the envelope of Gaza, which is built of settlements around of Gaza, built on Gaza's land and pushed the Gazans. Those people, 80% of them, as I said, the refugees who came and settled in there. A lot of them, they been born after the 1948, and some even passed away. They never seen outside the wildfires, the wildfires of the Gaza Strip. And from then, what happened after that, you seen 1955, the Zionist entity invade Gaza as well and commit the famous Khan Yunis and south of Rafah massacre, killed a lot of people. And the 1956 joint attack by the British and the French and the Israelis on Sinai. The Israelis occupied Gaza again at the time, caused huge massacres again, and took 1967 war when they, with the help of definitely the United States of America as a major force who helped them in destroying the Egyptian and the Syrian air force, and occupied in 6 days the Gaza Strip, the Sinai, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, including Jerusalem and Quds. And another wave of immigration been happening, and they pushed a lot of Palestinians out of the West Bank and out of Gaza as well. So this is the mechanism we're happening within the Gaza Strip. You come till the fast forward till before, even little bit before the October, the 7th of October operation. At the time, the Zionist entity with the Americans were engaging with the Palestinians from 1993 was something called the Accord Agreements, or kind of principles to give the Palestinians within 5 years of that, in return of stopping the Palestinian Intifada. Since the Palestinian Intifada erupted in 1987, and instead nearly the unarmed Palestinian people with rocks faced the mighty force of the Zionist entity. And you could see on TVs from Scandinavia to Australia how the Israeli army breaking the arms of little kids because they're holding stones and facing tanks. And this eruption of the Palestinians came from Rafah to even involve Palestinians within 1948, which they call the Zionist entity, and all over, and supported by the Arab masses. They wanted to see an end to that because that was the first time this Zionist entity was exposed to the world with this kind of a brutal activity against occupied people. All was played on the Western taxpayers. They are the only democracy in the world, and in that way, and they are the beacon of civilization in that backward area. This is the headlines. They were the media in the West marketing this Zionist entity according. And suddenly they see themselves started to being exposed, and the Palestinian resistance of the people or the armed struggle become respected. They don't want to see that because that means the whole Western project will be exposed against democracy, against human rights. It's a colonial project. And that's what happened since then. This is why they agreed with the Palestinians in Oslo to settle the area within something like self-rule or autonomy in the West Bank and Gaza, and within 5 years of that to give them the right to self-determination to establish their state in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. That never happened, never translated or interpreted in actions, except the Zionists used that cover of negotiation to settle the West Bank and eat the best of lands in there. And that's, instead of over 50,000 settlers in the West Bank, under the Oslo Agreement, it's inflated to come nearly 850,000 settlers occupying the West Bank. This has made the whole situation is cannot be sustained. The Palestinian erupted so many little intifadas against the Zionist entity till the second intifada, which they resorted to the armed struggle in it. Then the Zionist entity, led by Sharon at the time, devastated the West Bank and Gaza Strip. But the people in Gaza, they managed to pick up their arms and chase the Zionist army and its settlers in 2005. And they were kicked out of Gaza Strip, but they imposed a siege and a blockade around Gaza, which till today. From that time till today, the population or who's born in Gaza, most of them, they didn't see anything outside Gaza. They only look from the barbed wires, and they know this is the land of their fathers and their grandfathers. And they were put in this concentration camp, counted the calories they take in, counted the drops of water can arrive to them, or what kind of cooking oil, what kind of even toiletry or sanitary things allowed within Gaza. It's worse than any Nazi camp. This concentration camp of Gaza couldn't sustain all of these cheats which take in Oslo from 1993 till 2007, 2023, just last year. They were faced with a formula, the Palestinians, before the 7th of October, which is the deal of the century, which invented by Trump, recognizing Jerusalem al-Quds as the eternal capital of the Zionist entity, the sovereignty of the Zionist entity of the Golan Heights, which is Syrian occupied territories, and to expand the settlements within the West Bank. And even lately, he said, Israel is tiny, need to be expanded. The Palestinian people at the time, they seen the pressure being mounted on the Arab reactionary regimes to recognize the Zionist entity, call it normalization, like what happens with Morocco and was happening with Bahrain and the Emirates and then the Saudis. So the Palestinian resistance, they understood once the Saudis become involved in the equation, it means the Palestinian question is done and defeated by the Arabs, the Muslims, and the Zionists together. So they have to do something to stop the normalization, a train in its tracks. And they did that with the 23rd of October counter-attack operation to say to the world, this is the sons and daughters of the refugees from 1948 who's been placed in a concentration camp and who's been besieged and blockaded for years. If they would have put a kind of ceiling on top of Gaza, the Zionist entity would have boxed them in with that ceiling so they won't see the sun. That is the situation was. And those people resort to the resistance and the armed struggle. Remember that from 2018 till nearly 2021, those people were always, they started what they call the March of Return in 2018, peaceful resist and popular resistance movement against the wires and the borders and of the Zionist entity with Palestine, demanding the lifting of the siege and the blockade and all what they got in return. A lot of kids being killed by snipers or just targeted at their legs or their limbs. And this is became a habit. Every day the Israelis will target 30 or 40 of these people, killing some and injuring some. So nobody listened to the Palestinian people whatsoever. And the Arabic reactionary regimes were burying the cause of the Palestinians, preparing the ground for maybe a future kind of a cleansing of the land ethnically from the Palestinians. And that's what the main kind of a spark which is led the 7th of October in 23.
Okay, I just maybe want to go on then to perhaps the Israeli Zionist reaction to what happened on that day. Now, there are lots of different, how would we describe them? Lots of different kind of ideas around what happened, lots of question marks. One of them is why the Israelis moved the festival closer to the demarcation line. Another one is why they took up to 7 hours before they reacted. I read somewhere one of the people who had been held hostage on the day, that some members of the resistance had taken some people of her kibbutz, put them all in the house, and were in negotiations with the Zionist IDF. I think they were trying to surrender. And as a part of good faith, they took this particular hostage out, and the Israelis told her to run towards them. And then this is her testimony, not mine, that then the Israelis decided that they would open up with tank fire on the house that actually held Israeli kibbutz settlers inside. So there seems to be this first no reaction of the IDF, then an overreaction. Then we heard about the 40 beheaded babies and all the myths and the lies around that, and Israel claiming victimhood and the right to protect itself. And then we have had live on social media and on television a genocide against the people of Gaza since the 8th of October 2023. And colonization works through replacement via displacement. Can we assume, sadly, that this was always going to be the case, that if this didn't happen on the 8th of October 2024, there would be a false flag, or there would be some kind of litmus test that would allow the Israelis to then try and totally ethnically cleanse Gaza, annex the West Bank, and continued with its expansive Greater Israel project? And do you believe, without American support, that Israel could stand against the axis of resistance in West Asia?
I hope if I forget any of the points you remind me with. But to stay with, thank you for this is a very good and intelligent question. To begin with, the Zionist entity's leadership, and specifically Netanyahu and his fascists, they always are masters of turning or taking advantage of opportunities. Syria is a starking example of that. And so the Zionist entity, they were shocked to see the latest or the state-of-the-art technologies which they deployed on the envelope of Gaza, which is the wires and the walls and the cameras and the sensors and the satellite systems and the radars and all of that around Gaza, which they thought is even a fly cannot come across that wall without noticing. And they have a huge unit from their Zionist entity intelligence service, especially Unit 8200, which is a kind of military Mossad intelligence linked in there, watching all the movement, all the sounds on the ground in there. They were astonished to see there is around 1,200 freedom fighters break that wall while they're watching, infiltrated in there. They took over a territory which is nearly twice the size of the Gaza Strip within occupied Palestine and sustain it for days. Imagine if the Egyptian people, I'm not saying the regime, decided to give a hand to the Palestinian people, or the Jordanians, or the Syrians, or the Lebanese people, and join at the time that kind of move. They will definitely liberated most of Palestine in 1 week. If you've seen the push of the Palestinian resistance, this in its own, you see that attack, the reaction of the Zionist entity. The first attacks came, if you notice, were against the Gaza's universities. They targeted the Islamic University, Al-Azhar University, Palestine University, and all the other universities, and then schools and institutes, and after that they started targeting all the infrastructure. But once they targeted universities and schools, you'll understand those people who been debunking this high technology and using their own smart ways of reverse engineering all of this technologies, and use something simple to attack all of this technology and manage to succeed. The shock this Zionist entity faced at that day and the days after, Netanyahu still speaks about it. Even in the last month, he was mentioned the same thing to the Knesset. They saying this Zionist entity, which is Israel, till today is trying to build the deterrence around Gaza from what happened. And we seen on the 8th of October onwards with the Biden, the German Scholz, the what's his name at the time, Sunak in Britain, the French Macron, the Italian and the Romanians, all of them, and the Polish rushed together to hold this Zionist entity and to supply and open all their arsenals to it, to take as much as they can, finance mercenaries. Special units came from the United States of America, Delta. The British start roaming the skies of Gaza, and all of that. You see, the NATO, led by the United States of America, with mercenaries, were at the side of the Zionist entity to reassure it will regain deterrence against who? Against 1,200 freedom fighters from the Gaza Strip. This is the number of who went inside. And suddenly you can see the reaction of the Zionist entity regarding the concert in there near the border. Who puts a concert at the edge of the Gaza? Which means this is a way to them. They are looking at the Palestinian like people trapped in a sort of what they call it zoo. They watching people like that. This is how they brainwash them, because they think themselves are the chosen people and everybody else is below them. And they are watching the people in the concentration camp and say, look at our life, how we enjoying our holidays, enjoying the sun, the sand, the sea of Palestine, while its real owners of this land is locked in this concentration camp. This how sick these people. They are all, if you can see a lot of footage and a lot of video clips on all social media, especially in TikTok, about these things going on today near the Gaza Strip even. And most of them are high on drugs and they are enjoying. You can see the people bringing families to sit and watch the blowing up of the Gaza Strip and the rebels. And you can see some of the settlements near Gaza envelope. They say today we can see the sea from our houses of the military, because they demolished North Gaza, so they can see from their own houses. They have sea view now of the thing. This is saying it. Somebody who's allowed to have dual citizenship, come from Ukraine when it's minus 40 and enjoy the Gaza Strip or Palestine kind of Mediterranean weather, like they think they are in Andalusia, in Spain for free. They have another home in there and another home in Ukraine or in Poland or in somewhere else. They can enjoy the looting of other people's land and even killing them to enjoy their lives, because they can do that and they have the support of Western ruling elite, and some of it led by the United States of America. So this is part of it. And to them, when they see the counterattack against people holding, as they said, debunking that, where a lot of people from United States of America's like a gray zone website, and from the Zionist even entity is own media, when they debunked the story of the 40 babies, where is the evidence? They've been their heads cut, will show us who's their fathers, who's their mothers. There is no evidence. Oh, they put them, bake them in an oven. They say, where is these things? Show us any trace. They cannot, because all of this came from Zionist kind of fanatic as well. They call themselves the charities, who were doing this and doing these lies to get a lot of money from the Jewish organization in the United States of America and different, and all proved lies. And the Palestinians themselves, the first thing you can see when they took prisoners, you till today, even somebody was asking me yesterday, they making this construct, said the video was released a couple of days ago of an Israeli gear who's in the hands of the resistance, and even the spokesperson of a Qassam brigade. You look at him a year ago and the gear a year ago from the footage, he's become too thin, and she is still healthy. and still like putting more on weight. So they are looking after their own captives in there. All who's released from there, you can see they looked so well and looked after, and they were even the Zionist entities, own population criticizing them. Why are you laughing? Why you have this kind of nice relationship with your own captives? Because they treated them very well. This is a cultural thing. It's not about degrading people. It's not about turning them into animals and turning them into a kind of a target for their own fascist and Nazist kind of attacks. This is part of it, and you can see in the way when they say near the concert, so many cars being burned, so many cars being destroyed, hundreds of them along that route. How come somebody with AK-47 light armor infiltrating there? How can they burn all of these cars? How? With what? They don't have RPGs. They don't have rockets. They only have light weapons when they infiltrate it. So that can tells you the Zionist entity tanks and Apache attack helicopters when they were even targeting the houses you're talking about was held in it. Some of the resistance with families, they blow them up, and this is became even videos being beamed on their own media. So these guys, within the slogan of what they call it or the doctrine they created called the Hannibal Doctrine, they don't care about their own people as long as they can kill the Palestinian resistance. We know that for a long time in Palestine, but people now discover, especially the Zionist entity resident, discover this lately. This government doesn't give a damn about their own prisoners. This government doesn't give a damn about their own soldiers. We know that for a long time, the Palestinians, we've seen it in action. If there is one Palestinian resistant fighter in an area where is approximately there is 10 Israeli civilians, they blow them up to kill the Palestinian. This is what they call their own Hannibal Doctrine.
Yes, I believe it's part of a doctrine that states rather than allow Israelis to be captured and then exchanged for Palestinian prisoners, it just basically murder everybody so that the resistance doesn't have a trump card to play the way they did with the Israeli soldier who was held captive and then was exchanged for like 100 or 150 Palestinian prisoners. I just want to reinforce the idea that without America, Israel would probably fold like a house of cards. They may have the manpower on the ground, but they don't have the manufacturing capabilities to keep producing 2,000, 5,000 pound bunker buster bombs to drop on tents of innocent civilians in Gaza. We have seen, I think it was the Israeli Minister of Defense say on the 8th or 9th of October 2023, no water, no fuel, no medicine, no food. Now that is a day after the 7th of October operation in historic Palestine by the Palestinian resistance. So there appears to have been already a decision taken within 24 hours that we are going to make these people pay. We are going to turn Gaza into a car park. We have seen a weaponization of food through a campaign of starvation in northern Gaza. You more than anyone with friends and family in Gaza and being the patron of Palestine Aid, helping to supply food to those displaced people in need in Gaza, are fully aware of what's happening on the ground. Very sadly today, I watched something on social media which talked about packs of dogs that have gone feral and that are basically attacking people who are injured and cannot be retrieved by the ambulances. Packs of wild, starving dogs are beginning to basically hunt down people that are on their own, people that are injured, people that cannot defend themselves. This is how low the morality of the world has sunk, that they have allowed people to be, I mean, is this prehistoric times where wild animals roam freely and attack human beings and God forbid what they're doing? But Dr. Shaath, if we could move on maybe to Lebanon.
Can I
Under,
can
of
I
course,
mention?
go
Yeah,
ahead.
just want to elaborate 2 points about what you said. Yes, about the wild animals in the 80s, before the invasion of 1982. In Lebanon, as you want to mention, the Zionist entity used to break loose wild dogs and wild boars at the Palestinian resistant bases in the south of Lebanon. And at the individuals or the villages who they think they were the incubation of the resistance at the time. This is not a new. And these dogs, well, wild dogs in Gaza, the same thing. They are trained wild dogs and maybe more animals as they did in the late 80s in Lebanon. They dominate in Gaza. These things, they bring them in their hundreds and unleash them in Gaza. As before, even before the 7th of October, every couple of months they used to release their sewage water at the north of Gaza to try to kill the agriculture, to cause pandemics and all of that, while there is no sanitation system working in the north, or that because of the of lack of electricity and fuel and that. And as well, when you mentioned about the defense minister, when he declared on the 8th of October, as well, this is from the Likud right-wing government, and he is United States of America's man, was in Netanyahu's government. Okay, as well, the president of the Zionist entity, Herzog, which he claims to be Irish. Okay, and his father was before him the president of Israel. He said there is no one innocent in the Gaza Strip. So you have the Likud and you have the Ma'arach, which is the Labour Party, the Israeli Labour Party as well. All of them. You have the left, the liberals, the right, the ex-ultra-right. All of them want to destroy and annihilate the Palestinians because, as I said, these differences in liberal or right-wing, religious, secular, all that, to do with this chosen white supremacist Jewish people, nothing to do with what they dehumanized as the Palestinian people. Again, the other point about United States of America's support of the Zionist entity, as I said, who infiltrated in the 7th of October is only 1,200 freedom fighters. And they did that. And they took over 3-4 times the size of Gaza they controlled. Imagine if the Zionist entity, the United States of America, stopped supporting it for one day. Stop that, the whole support, and it will take just less than a week for it to crumble without even anybody fighting it. Because these guys, they live in free education, free health, high wages, which is 4 times sometimes the standard wage in the UK or in the USA as well, which is supported by taxpayers, all come from the West for the price for them to dominate the West Asia and the Arab world in behalf of the empire.
Yes, well, when we're talking about the right-wing extremism within Israel and the Knesset, I mean, we only have to remember the words of Netanyahu when he invoked Amalek.
Yes.
And that was a tribe that was devastated, destroyed, and massacred by, I assume, the Israeli tribe, when they said that not a man, woman, suckling child, or beast of burden would be left alive. So this is the mentality. If you have an enemy, you must destroy that enemy. Little babies grow up to be terrorists. That's what they say. That's their reason for killing babies and killing babies in mothers' wombs. But if we could move on to Lebanon, I mean, under international law, there is a moral obligation and indeed a governmental obligation for people, where possible, to prevent genocide from occurring. And this is where I believe both the Ansar Allah movement and the Hezbollah movement, under what I consider to be the Fourth Geneva Convention of trying to prevent genocide, opened up their own fronts in defense of the people of Gaza in order to deter Israel from committing these acts of genocide. Now, we've lost Saeed Nasrallah, and we've lost Qasem Soleimani a few years ago. And there appear to be people within Lebanon, if we go back to the confessional state, and you have like a Christian president and you have a Muslim prime minister. There seem to be elements within Lebanon who are working to an Israeli, American, French policy of trying to contain and disarm and disenfranchise Hezbollah. So we've had the 60-day period. I'm not sure when it ends. Why do you think that was agreed to in the first place? And what do you think happens on day 61, considering the Israelis couldn't get 2 kilometers inside Lebanon while they were fighting Hezbollah? But now that the Lebanese army, which is partially armed and partially trained by the Americans, is in place, the Israelis seem to be entering villages at will.
The answer in your question already, you brilliantly articulated your question, which is the answer included in there. First of all, Lebanon, after the French, it was a French colonized country, and the French till today they think it's under their umbrella. The Franco kind of culture lives well within the Phalange party and the Lebanese forces, 2 fascist forces in Lebanon, one led by Samir Ja'ja and the other one led by the Gemayel family, the Phalange. And these guys, they're the one who destroyed Lebanon in the 70s and plunged it in a kind of civil war. And they are agents and actors acting on behalf of the Zionist entity, because from the 70s, the Zionist entity looked at itself, I am going to be the Jewish state in the Middle East, but there is no other, because surrounding it all secular states. The Arab world used to be most of it secular, apart from the monarchies in the Gulf, like Saudis and that. So you have Iraq secular, you have Egypt secular, you have Syria secular, you have Libya secular, all seculars. And suddenly, with the American invasions and the Zionist entity invasion as well, which supported secularism, start to be under attack. And Iraq, a great example, when the American invaded Iraq in 2003, displaced most of the Christian of the Iraqs outside Iraq, targeted their churches, this and that, and turned the country to be in turmoil between kind of religious factions, Sunni, Shi'i, and Kurdish, and all of that. And we've seen the rise of Takfiri groups, terrorist groups like Daesh and the rest of them, who's infested the region and Syria, and today they are occupying Syria. And Syria, which is a month ago used to be a secular state, you've seen the village of Ma'lula is the second holy site for Christianity after Bethlehem. They went on the run to Lebanon, abandoned their villages and their monasteries and their churches, because they know what happened in Iraq is repeated in Syria, maybe with vengeance as well. Saying that the Christian forces in Lebanon, they were trying what we call them in Arabic Izaliyin at the time. This is a term meant the isolationists. They tried to create a kind of sectarian entities. They tried that in the south of Lebanon, south of Litani, to create a buffer zone at the time, ruled by military tyrants called Haddad and Lahad, these forces. And they were payrolled by the Zionist entity, armed, acted on behalf of it, and they created a sectarian entity for them and their Christian rule. And the same thing they're trying to in East Beirut and parts of Lebanon, these guys to create a kind of a Christian entity during the civil war. And then after the invasion of Lebanon by the Zionist entity, they imposed their will. And this to give justification as well for the existence of a Jewish entity in an area which used to be secular. We have a Jewish entity here. Look at the Lebanese; they have Christians. Look in Iraq today, there is maybe there is Shia or Sunni. Look in Syria tomorrow. That is part of the game to divide the area among sectarian lines. And in Lebanon, the resistance, if I go back to the resistance, you can see the axis of resistance, which is Syria was the heart of it. The brain of it is Iran, and maybe the force was in it within Gaza and Lebanon and Yemen and part of the organizations in Iraq. They seem two figures I want to focus when I'm answering. They seem Soleimani, this brilliant strategic thinker in a force called Al-Quds force, which is mean Jerusalem force. His aim is to liberate and to help the Palestinians to liberate Al-Quds. Since Palestine as a question is not just a question of a foreign force coming and occupying this. It's a religious question and for the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's a religious duty for a lot of the resistant movement in Yemen or in Iraq as well. Forget the Palestinians, and as well for the Lebanese and Syrians. Syria looked at it as a sectarian nationalist as well. But these guys, Soleimani start at the time, if and remember, in the year 2002, they were the Americans. They said they captured a Korean A ship coming from Iran and from the Red Sea, I think, to the Mediterranean too, and having lots of weaponry during the second Intifada for Arafat at the time, and they were showing the RPGs, rockets, guns, grenades, and that. And then after that, and they arrested the guy who was one of the Arafat lieutenants on the top of the ship, called his name Shobaki. So you can see, even there was a difference in political views between the leadership of Iran and Arafat because of the Iran-Iraq war, because they think Arafat stood by Saddam Hussein in the war against the Iranians. Still, they are supported him in the battle against the Zionist entity. They didn't look at the differences in positions and political things. So you can see the Iranian with the strategic thinking of them and Soleimani supporting and helping the Palestinians resistant faction, all of it, okay, and to develop their capabilities or in manufacturing rockets or in deploying new tactics and in helping them in building the resistant infrastructure. One of the things which is I remember heard in Al Mayadeen TV in 2000, I think, and maybe 14 or later, Hassan Nasrallah, the late leader of late leader of Hezbollah, was assassinated by the Zionist entity a few months ago, was saying Qasem Soleimani asked them to give at the time there were new Cornet missiles, which is anti-tank. They had Hezbollah with them, and he said he asked them to give these weaponry to the Palestinian resistance. And he said Qasem Soleimani and Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, helped in making sure these weapons will arrive to the Gaza Strip. And at the time we heard the first attack was used with the coordinate, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the first organization to use it. And they used it against Markava at the time. And it was like a bullseye, they said. That can shows there is no distinction between religious or non-religious nationalists or Marxist. I'm saying the PFLP here, it's a Marxist-Leninist group. It's not something. So the resistance doesn't discriminate against any member of its factions in there. Going at the assassinations, to them, assassination of Soleimani was a major point for the Nazis of America. They believed Soleimani was the obstacle in their way. As I mentioned, the normalization of projects with the Saudis, and he was against that, and he helped the Palestinians to be against that. In his fight against the Takfiri groups in Iraq, who they occupied Iraq. Daesh occupied nearly 2/3 of Iraq. The man is built a resistant movement. They called it Hashd al-Sha'bi, the popular population against the Takfiri group. And this popular resistance managed, and he was at the front lines against the Takfiri groups. And the same thing, he was fighting these groups from spreading all over Syria. And they managed helping Syria up till 1916 and onwards to cleanse it from these Takfiri groups. Today you can see his absence, what's meant. You know, one of the articles, which is the Guardians mentioned, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 days, the 1st of January, I think the article was published in the Guardian. One of the former security minister saying in the article that the right decision taken by Trump to assassinate Soleimani led to the mechanism and to the domino effect which we see in the Arab world, which is today, as he called it, the revolutionaries ruling Syria, and they got rid of Assad. To that sick, they are thinking. They term revolutionary when a British security former minister calling Takfiri groups from Al-Qaeda rooted revolutionaries. That is just answer itself. These guys are like incubators of terrorism, deploy them when they want, and they just label them freedom fighters if they wish, or statesmen, as they done with Julani in Syria. You can come again to the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. The late leader of Hassan Nasrallah, I think it's an operation accumulated from the year of 2006, Comrade here. And the 2006, just want to put that in context, if you allow me. George W. Bush, sent his foreign minister at the time, Colin Powell, to the Syrian President Bashar Assad in 2004. Asked him specifically to get rid of the Palestinian resistance and close their offices and bases in Syria, to de-link from relationship with the resistance or with the Lebanese resistance, and to contain the Iranian presence at the time, or influence, I mean, in Syria. Bashar al-Assad told Colin Powell, the meeting is over and we don't take orders from no one. Suddenly, you see, in 2006, the American and the Zionist entity, they wanted to form what they call it the vice crib. They sent the Israeli forces from the south of Lebanon and from Tanaf area, where it's the border of Iraq. They wanted to invade Syria, the Americans. But they were surprised how strong and prepared the Lebanese resistance, and they defeated them. So the whole new Middle East project, which Condoleezza Rice used to be screaming about, is gone, disappeared. That because of the readiness of the resistance and the determination of Syria at the time under Assad to face that. Since then a year before that, in 2005, there was assassination of the Lebanese prime minister called Hariri, and there was suddenly an international tribunal happened in Lebanon to investigate his assassination. You can remember Arafat was poisoned and killed in 2004. So many being killed, assassinated from leaders. There is no one investigated anything. But this man, there's an international tribunal under the United Nations and controlled by the United States of America to investigate. And in that, they asked him to hand all the information and data of Lebanon to this tribunal. And all the information of every individual exists in Lebanon, from address, work, health records, telephone numbers, details, financial, or handed to the tribunal. And from that day, this is of course at the United States, in the United States of America's hand, being used by the Zionist entity. So they infiltrated through this information the whole fabric of society in Lebanon. They know who is who, and they fed it to their artificial intelligence. It's not individuals looking, it's drones in the skies, and know who is this guy and that guy. And from there, the embassy, the American embassy in Lebanon, who's controlling the state because of, I mentioned the sectarian factions in Lebanon, who and the French and Saudi Arabia and the others were buying and infiltrating Lebanon. So the idea of targeting the leadership with the pager attack, which is a massive terror campaign against civilians, against organization, and against Hezbollah. Remember, Hezbollah is part of the Lebanese government. Hezbollah is a huge bloc in the Lebanese parliament and part of this state. Hezbollah is not just a resistant fighters at the borders defending Lebanon, because Russia, Iran, China, other countries offered to arm the Lebanese army, but the Lebanese state refused because the Americans telling them not to. The Lebanese army is likely, any police force in Sri Lanka is stronger than the Lebanese army, and they wanted this Lebanese army to defend the border of the Zionist entity. This is what they want. They don't want any Arabic strength official in Lebanese army or any other army to be present and face the Israelis. And that's why, since these Takfiri groups who took over Syria with the help of the United, of course, the planning of the Zionists and Americans and Turkish, they destroyed the Syrian Arab army because they don't want any presence, any force of these armies to be there to face them. And this you can understand what is the Lebanese army and what is the Syrian army. That's what Israel wants. Israel wants to be able to invade Damascus or Aleppo anytime, and the same thing to do in Lebanon. And they thinking today they're gonna be eating parts because they say we are not gonna listen, adhere to the 60 days ceasefire and then move our forces. We are gonna stay in different areas. We're gonna build a military post in different areas in the south of Lebanon. But they are mistaken. Since, let me put it this way, the who asked for ceasefire? It wasn't the Lebanese. It was the Zionist entity after what we call it the Black Sunday. When in the Black Sunday, the Lebanese resistance built itself actually after the assassination of its military leadership and its political leadership and of Hassan Nasrallah. And within 10 days, they start escalating their military attacks on the Zionist entity. On the Black Sunday, before the Israelis attacked, they were asking for ceasefire. We remember before it a few days, the Netanyahu's bedroom was breached by a Lebanese drone. The 4.5 million people went underground in bunkers because the missiles, heavy missiles of the Hezbollah rocket, the salvos reach near the border of Gaza, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, which is Java, Haifa, and near Al-Quds, and all the entity, and they were terrified from that. They couldn't sustain that. They didn't know how to even take down a drone on top of their head, being maneuvering for hours, and sending helicopters and that's why they pushed for that. And the Lebanese factions, the Christians or the government or the whatever, they were pressurizing the resistance to take this opportunity and to save the country from destruction. I don't want to say it was the right decision or the wrong decision to decide yes to stop now their attack on the Zionist entity. But once that is done, then you see the Americans, they said there is the agreement of Lebanese to stop this, and there is a secret agreement between the United States of America and the Zionist entity what to do. And you can see how they broke this ceasefire how many times? Hundreds of times. And they were demolishing villages, putting, as I said, a new military post, and now they're extending that between the south of Lebanon border. But the resistance is still strong, and the resistance, they said at the couple of days ago, the leader, the newly Naim Qasim, the leader of Hezbollah, they said we are a resistant movement. we can adhere as we pressurize by the 60 days, or we can. Our duty is to protect our people, and the resistance is not a front line comeback. While the resist, you mentioned that yourself in the question. While the resistance were fighting the Zionist almighty military with 5 divisions, is a very professional soldiers, couldn't advance hundreds of meters in south of Lebanon during the war. The Lebanese resistance were able to stop them, to hold them, to deny them taking the land in the south of Lebanon. Once the ceasefire came in, they start going everywhere because there is an umbrella for their kind of a breaking of the ceasefire by the French, by the Saudis, by the United States of America, and by some Lebanese already players.
Uh, Time's nearly up. It's amazing how quickly time disappears when we're chatting. I just got to wrap up a few wee things in and around my concern for Lebanon is that if the resistance moved back above the Litani River, the Lebanese army took up their positions. What's to stop the Israelis one day just going straight up to the Litani River because the Lebanese army is in no position to stop them? But I would be aware potentially that the resistance groups are still in southern Lebanon and are still in a position to deter any future aggression. But as you've already pointed out, this steady aggression by the Israelis slowly over time could actually move the border forward by 1 kilometre, 10 kilometres, 20 kilometres. Before you know it, the resistance could be back to 2006 and having to come up from behind the Israeli aggression in order to free Lebanon. I'm just going to quickly say something about Syria. Apparently, the Israelis have taken over nearly 1/3 of Syria, including one of the water dams. It's a classic Israeli plan to steal the water in order to then deprive towns and villages of water supply, and therefore they claim they turned Palestine into they made the desert bloom, obviously with Palestinian blood, but they're actually going to do the opposite in Syria by creating a desert, by preventing the farmers from getting water. So you have the Turks and the Americans in 1/3, you have the Israelis in a second third, you've got Al-Nusra Front, HTS in the other one. Their battle cry was Christians to Beirut and Alawites to the grave. Now there appears to be remnants of not only the Syrian Arab army, but of communities within the Alawite community along the coast, which represents more than 2 million people, have already decided that these Takfiri terrorists do not represent them. Not only do they not represent them, they refuse to be murdered by them in their beds at night by these people who are going to try eventually to impose their form of Islamic culture upon non-Muslim necessarily sections of society. So we've just come to an hour there. So Dr. Shaath, I'd like to thank you very much yet again for joining us. If we had more time, we could have talked about Syria in depth. We could have talked about Yemen. We could have talked about Tehran. I've recently just returned from a conference in Tehran, and I very much heard from the people in that room exactly what you've said and your analysis across the whole of West Asia. And while some people have lost hope with the fall of Syria, others see an opportunity for Syria to regain its national independence through a Hezbollah-like group fighting the occupation of the Americans and the Turks and HDS and the Israelis. So last word to you, brother, please.
Okay, last word, I say the wars we see in right now in Lebanon and in Syria, as you mentioned, they call it the David Pass, which is this is a project the Zionist entity want to steal the water The biggest basin of fresh water is in the Golan Heights and in Jabal al-Sheikh and near Dar'a area. This is where they moved just 15 kilometers away from the capital of Damascus. And they want to connect it to the Euphrates. So they want to control that water and link it with the Jordan River. In 1967, part of this war of 1967 was the transfer or playing with the direction of the River Jordan. At the time, Jordanians have their own water in the River Jordan and freely. Today, the Jordanians buy their fresh water from the Zionist entity after taking control of that. This is what's going to happen with the Syrians. Today, the Syrian water is under the Zionist entity occupation, and they will pay for that in the future. This is part of the thing to make sure even the water doesn't exist, Israel controlling the tap of water in the Arab world. The other part of this, brother, is the gas. There is in the East Mediterranean a huge reserves of gas, protected from Gaza till Latakia in Syria. And this is the Zionist entity with the Turks want to have, with the Americans as well, control over that. And we know the Americans are already in the East Euphrates, sucking the gas and oil of the Syrians and sending it as well to Netanyahu. Netanyahu and the Turks want that part. So it's a gas and water part of it. And in the future, you'll see a pipeline coming from Qatar through Syria, going to Europe to stop totally anybody even thinking of a drop of gas from Russia coming to Europe. This is the title of this wars.
I heard about a decade ago someone say, not talking about what's happening now, future wars won't be about the resources of gold or coal or even potentially oil and gas. It'll be securing water to facilitate your society. Dr. Shaath, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'd like to thank you again. And I hope you please join us at future episodes on the Independent Activist. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.